and welcome to Career Champions Level 3. Our presenter today is Amy Gardner, Manager of Student Employment with the Career Center. Amy, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, good morning. So welcome from Aiken. I'm working from home today, so I'm really excited to be able to share this information for you all. When we get going, I'll turn it off and then I'll hook it over to you guys. But I want to introduce what this topic is. If all of you have been through any of our other Career Champion programs, this is our third level. And to be clear, there's no level 1, 2, 3. It really just means we offer 3 of them and you can take them at any point in time. This is just the third one. So what we're going to talk about is career readiness. And what we mean by that is actually a lot of what Rachel talked about within counselor education supervision with where they are. I think that that's really going to tie into a lot of what we talk about. So buckle in, Rachel. But we're going to really transition into what do our students need? What are they missing? What do employers report back to us that they are missing in terms of what skills they're looking for students when they're ready to offer students employment or jobs, internships, what have you. So we're going to go over some data. We're going to touch base on what we can do in the classroom, in our workspace, with students we supervise, you name it. We're going to really dig deep into some of these things. So I want to define what career readiness is. This is based off of NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers. So this is a group of folks who get together consistently, and I'm going to put their website in the chat for you all if you want to check them out. But we get a lot of data from them on a quarterly basis of where our students rank, what are trends within the employment realm and also colleges, and what are they looking for moving forward for students and how we can assist them. So career readiness is a foundation from which to demonstrate requisite core competencies that broadly prepare the college educated for success in the workplace and lifelong career management. I do want to note that their definition that NACE has provided for career readiness really does focus on those who've gone through the collegiate experience. I would argue that career readiness is for anybody, for folks coming out of high school, whether they went to a 2-year institution or they're going to a transitional school. I think that this is more broad than just the college educated students because we have such a diverse background of who comes to see us and who we serve. And I do want to be cognizant of that this really does touch everyone who wants to enter the workforce. NACE has identified 8 career competencies for folks who are ready to go into work. So what they are looking for is career and self-development, communication, critical thinking, and we're going to dive a lot into critical thinking today, equity and inclusion, leadership, professionalism, teamwork, and technology. So if you were to say, what do our students need and what are employers looking for in students, it's these 8 things. They're not as much concerned with their GPA. They want to know, what do they have to offer? What skills do they have? What transferability do they bring to our team? And how do they work in a group? How are they actually ready to work on a team and deliver services? So the top 5 of those that we're going to focus on pretty heavy today is communication, critical thinking, equity and inclusion, professionalism, and teamwork. It's not that career and self-development isn't important, same with leadership or technology, but I know my staff and I were very kind of shocked to see that leadership dropped out of the top 5. I think that was a huge theme through, when you think about like the 2010s, that was people wanted leadership. They wanted folks to step up in their roles and be able to lead teams. It's not that it's taking a back seat. Leadership shows up in a different way. You don't have to be a supervisor to be a leader. You don't have to be the CEO to be a leader. So this is starting to funnel through different categories in a very different way that we haven't seen before. So why now? Why are we talking about this? So not just with President Amoritas. I know you've probably heard him talk a lot about college to career, and that phrase has been around for a long time actually, but the focus on it has definitely changed. So when we talk to NACE and get report from them about what employers are looking for, they're focusing on AI. So AI is starting to come up in the workforce. We're seeing it here at USC. How are we integrating this into our daily work? And then what do our students know about it and do they know how to use it? Or on the flip side, is AI replacing jobs? For some of them, yes, but not for all of them. So we're learning more and more about artificial intelligence and how that is in the job force. Part of it's new, part of it's not, right? When we think about like ChatGPT and things like that that are coming up, that's a different kind of AI than we've seen in the past. versus like a platform that automates things, right? So that's another form of AI. And 3 in 4 employers, they are telling us that finding talent to support their business strategy is difficult. Now, I will tell you here at the Career Center, we do everything we can to connect employers to students. However, there's only so far we can take a student. They have to engage with an employer. They have to be ready for an interview. They have to know how to publicize their skills. And that's the big gap that we're going to talk about today. And 51% say that education systems have done little or nothing to help address this skill shortage. Feels like a personal blow. I feel like we're doing a lot, but it is their perspective, right? So an employer will say 51% of the time, they're not sure that the higher education systems are doing what they should be doing to prep students for the workforce. They're reporting that we're spending a lot of time on academia and not as much time as transitioning them to post-graduation success. So USC students, these are 2 different categories. So on the left-hand side, you see these are what employers need on a scale of 1 to 8. This is slightly outdated. I think this was in 2019. So we're still getting these back for our USC evaluations. However, employers are saying the top thing they need on the left-hand side is critical thinking. They're rating that number 1. That's the top thing they want to see students bring to their organization. Then on the right-hand side, how they are specifically rating our students, critical thinking is dead last. So they need critical thinking from us. USC students are rating last in this category. However, they are very global and culturally influenced. They have a lot of focus on DEI. They're very forward thinking and futuristic and inclusive with their thought process. Other employers are saying that's not necessarily what they need more of. They're incorporating that more into their companies, but they need folks who can think on their own, think on their feet, be ready to go, and they're not seeing that from our students. So I find this a very interesting statistic and slide of how they're getting this feedback. So here are the soft skills again. This is just a different way to show that. So the importance is within the gray area employers, again, they're rating critical thinking as one of their top categories, and the proficiency that our students are rating in is fairly low. So you can see all of these things. It's really, we're not going to dive too deep in here, but what we're essentially saying is there's a skills gap. There's a gap within our students and how they are able to portray their skills. Just another thing here, what do students think? Students are consistently rating themselves higher in these categories than employers are rating them. So just a quick reference point, employers are rating them lower in that blue category. So for them, again, 99% of critical thinking is important for them. 56% is what they're rating our students. And then the next slide, students are rating themselves as like, I'm killing it. I'm the best critical thinking you've ever seen. And that's not what is being reported back to us. Here are just some quick things that we can do within higher ed to bridge the gap. It's how to emphasize career readiness curriculum, boosting experiential education learning outcomes. So a couple of you with what you do every day with what you've listed in here, it's how do we increase students to take an internship or do part-time work, do a co-op, find employment opportunities on campus. All of these things help build that skill set that they're not focusing on. Assessing students following their work experiences. So let's say they go do an internship. Let's say they are a CAS student. They go out and have an internship. How are we then helping that student reflect on that experience, what they've gained, what's transferable, and then how to talk to an employer about those things. Using technology consistently, how to deliver career readiness results, and then comparing your student data annually. We also need to figure out how to leverage data to focus on curriculum. Like basically, we want to incorporate career readiness into our curriculum. So if we have a lesson on fill in the blank of whatever it is, how does that relate back to the field? How does what they're learning right now relate to their full-time job experience later? I know that was a lot. If any of you have questions at this point, I'll go ahead and take them. But we're going to briefly talk about each section and then move forward into some brainstorming and exercises for everyone to deliver this with your students in real time. I'll go ahead and wait, see if there's any questions. Perfect. We're crushing it. All right. So career readiness, this is one, again, that they're looking for students. The definition that NACE has outlined is proactively developing oneself and one's career through continual personal and professional learning, awareness, and one's strengths and weaknesses. So in a nutshell, it's, do I know where I want to go? Do I know what I'm good at? Do I know where I need to improve? How do I advocate for myself? Do I do my job? Have I maintained relationships? So it's really just your holistic awareness of what you want to do, how you're going to get there, what's needed to excel within the field, etc. So we're not going to spend too much time on this one. This is leadership. So recognize and capitalize on personal and team strengths to achieve organizational goals. And again, I know in the beginning we had talked about you don't have to be a supervisor to be a leader. I see students every day come in, and if they are helping their peers have a better understanding of material, if they're tutoring, if they are helping to achieve to the larger goal, that's leadership. If they're seeing people step up in a way that it needs to happen, it's leadership. There's also our silent leaders on campus who lead by example. They don't have to say a lot, but they're doing a lot. And I think that that's also helpful. So even if you're sitting in your classroom or you're doing a small group discussion with some students, even if they don't speak up, it doesn't mean they don't have leadership qualities. Look for ways that they are showing subtle leadership, mentorship, maybe it's different levels of maturity of how they present themselves. This comes across in a lot of different ways, whether it's advocacy as well. If they want to step up and advocate for something and say, hey, we're not really agreeing with this. Can we find a better solution to solve X problem? That's a leadership quality. So if there's any other way that you all can utilize this within your classroom or your small groups or students you supervise, this would be a good way to do it. And then technology. So technology is understanding and leveraging technologies ethically to enhance efficiencies, complete tasks, and accomplish goals. I really appreciate, from a human resources perspective, that someone has used the term ethically within technology. We've seen students utilize technologies in ways that are not probably the best way to use them. So I think social media can be a great tool. That's still a technology. Learning a new platform of Adobe Design, that's technology. If they have access to a camera system at their work to monitor security, that's technology. So there's a lot more to it. Or is it building something brand new? So there are a lot of ways that technology is enhanced. When we think about nursing, what new tech is coming out? How do we improve the field of nursing, the field of medicine with technology? So technology means a lot of things. It's new creation, it's innovation, it's online platforms, it's physical tools. There's a lot happening. And so how are our students on the cutting edge and know what's coming out and have their eyes on the future, what's happening? But ethically, I think it's really important that we teach our students ethics within how to use things appropriately and not for a different or alternative motive. I would love to have some interaction. We're going to move through into critical thinking. So I want y'all to kind of think about, what do you do every day? What do students see you for? What are you teaching? How are you involved with them? And how can you instill critical thinking in your daily work, your classroom work, curriculum, one-on-one meetings? With this definition, identify and respond to needs based upon understanding of situational context and logical analysis. So how are we teaching this in our classrooms? And what do you think are some key features of critical thinking? How could this be displayed? Y'all can either unmute yourself or put it in the chat. This is the #1 thing employers are asking for our students, and they are ranking very low. Kimberly, conflict resolution within team-based scenarios, for sure. So something else that I love, in addition to case studies or scenarios, has anyone ever heard of a training module called Behind Closed Doors? Perfect. So I'm happy to send this out as well at the end of the presentation. But this is typically based with hands-on practice with acting and simulation. Nursing actually does this really well. It's setting up a real life scenario. So whether we have a mannequin on the table, maybe we've preset it to have certain symptoms or exhibit certain displays, and then a student has to apply what they've learned to this mannequin and whatever their situation is to treat it with appropriate care. Now, Behind Closed Doors is a little less intense than that, but it does provide students with hands-on application. So you have a scenario and you have folks actually act this out, and someone has to come in and resolve the conflict or the situation or apply policy that they've learned. And so you can really make this to anything, and it really helps students think through what they've learned in real time and how to apply their knowledge. Now, the toughest part is students being able to talk to you about what critical thinking is. So here are some of the things that NACE has provided to us as what a sample behavior would be for critical thinking. They're looking for students who can make decisions and solve problems using sound, inclusive reasoning and judgment. Gather and analyze information from a diverse set of sources and individuals to fully understand the problem. So there are several times in work when we think about our daily work, we show up and someone sends us a team message and they say, hey, we've got a problem, but they don't tell you what it is. Or they give you very limited information and you have to dig to figure out what's actually happening, what's the severity of the issue, how important is it? And so these are all things that they're looking for from students as well, is how do you analyze and dissect limited information to be able to make the best judgment call. Proactively anticipate needs and prioritize action steps. Accurately summarize and interpret data with an awareness of your personal bias that may impact your outcomes. So, that's really relevant when it comes terms to a student approaches a situation. They don't fully know what's going on. They only see one lens and then they attack it from that one lens. Well, I'm only seeing this small window. I'm not worried about these other things because this is the only thing that I see. They have to be able to pull out and see the entire picture. Perfect. And then multitask in a fast-paced environment. I have a joke with my students that fast-paced, when folks put that in a job description and it says must excel in a fast-paced environment, sometimes that means their business is a dumpster fire, and that's not necessarily always the case. Fast-paced just means you have to move quickly and move with limited information. Where data changes daily, a situation can change on a dime. It doesn't necessarily mean everything's on fire, but that tends to be what this group of students believes, or Gen Z students, like, well, fast-paced typically means that they don't have it together. That's not true. It means that it's typically quickly moving. It doesn't mean they're not organized, right? So they are looking for this critical thinking. So I want y'all to kind of think about other ways that we can interpret critical thinking into our curriculum and get students involved in that way. So the next one is communication. NACE says it is clearly and effectively exchanging information, ideas, facts, and perspectives with persons inside and outside the organization. So same thing, if there are some sample behaviors that you all think that you're doing well with, or ways that you're incorporating this into your curriculum, I'd love to hear them. How are you all utilizing the communication? Sure, Kimberly, absolutely. Yeah, interprofessional educational sessions and activities, getting them involved, getting them to talk, putting them in groups. Sometimes students are more likely to speak in small groups than they are in front of the entire classroom. So that can definitely help get students involved with communication. There's a lot of different types of communication, right? So it's our verbal, nonverbal, what's written, what's exchanged, what's understood. There's a lot of different types of that. And so I think that's important for students to understand as well. So NACE has identified these as understanding the importance of and how to demonstrate various types of communication, have your active listening skills. Students need to know how to sit and listen, and then as well as how to influence or utilize their words and choose them carefully, communicate in a clear and organized manner so that others can effectively understand. I know my grad students, we had to have a conversation about the overuse of emojis and that not necessarily needed. I don't mind a couple, but we don't have to have them in every email after every sentence. So we did talk about that, which they were like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. I said, yes, it's very much a thing. So framing communication with respect to diversity and learning styles, and then asking appropriate questions for specific information. So if they're missing communication, how do they clarify it, or how do they get exactly what they need? And then how to promptly inform others when they need guidance or assigned tasks. So how are you also then communicating, hey, I need help, or I'm not sure I fully understand the instructions here or the task. Can we get clarification on that? Beautiful. The third one that employers are looking for is teamwork. So they are wanting to build and maintain collaborative relationships to work effectively towards common goals while appreciating diverse viewpoints and shared responsibilities. Some of the sample behaviors are how to listen carefully to others, taking time to understand and ask appropriate questions without interrupting, effectively manage conflict, interact with and respect diverse personalities, and meet ambiguity with resilience. So I did put Brene Brown's information down here for anybody who's curious about who she is. She's incredible. She does a lot of work as a psychologist with reviewing vulnerability and clear communication and expectations of how to be brave with who you are and have clear communications with others, which I love. I'm a big fan, Rachel. You also said something that reminds me of one of my favorites, Ted Lasso, who, if you all are not familiar with that show, it's a great one. You should check it out. However, their phrase that Coach Lasso says a lot is be curious, not judgmental. And I love how to use that with my approach for students. And it talks about really how to ask questions to understand and not to judge. We're always learning. And so I think that's a great way to help students learn effective communication that's in a different way. Perfect. So something else to teamwork, it's how to be accountable for your individual and team responsibilities. So it's taking responsibility and saying we've been delivered with this charge. This is something that we need to take ownership of and how to finish it. Employ personal strengths, knowledge, and talents to complement those of others. Exercise the ability to compromise and how to be agile. So adaptability, how do we need to pivot if something has to change or if an outcome has suddenly changed priorities? So how do we move quickly in that? Obviously collaborating and building strong positive relationships with folks on your team. Perfect. Professionalism, knowing work environments differ greatly. So understand and demonstrate effective work habits and act in the interest of the larger community within the workspace. This has been a really interesting conversation within what professionalism means to us, whether we're an instructor, a professor, staff, administration, or students. So there's a really interesting disconnect regarding what the new standard of professionalism is, and that can mean a lot of things. It could touch on communication, how we dress, how we interact, where we work, right? All of these things have been in conversation for a couple of years of what's changing and what's different. I know I've had to kind of scale back my couple of things within professionalism of what students need. And I'm like, no, you're right. Like that kind of has changed, whatever that may be. And so it's also being open to discussion, yet teaching our students, you can't come to, a certain workplace wearing sweatpants. Like if the standard is you're wearing scrubs to work, explaining them why scrubs is what you're wearing, right? And so there's an educational gap there that we need to make sure students are ready for when they come into the professional workplace. So professionalism, some of those key indicators that NACE has provided for us is acting equitably with integrity and accountability to yourself and the organization, maintaining that positive personal brand in alignment with organizational and personal career values. We're trying to teach students too, you are an extension of where you work as well. So unfortunately, sometimes that's how it is. So if you're wearing your polo and it has your logo on it, you may want to change before you go somewhere if you want to go do something else. So be present, prepared, and dependable. Prioritize and complete tasks to accomplish organizational goals. Consistently meet or excel your goals and expectations. Attention to detail, right? And then showing a high level of dedication towards going to a job. Rachel, you touched on it a little bit when we talked about some of the conflict resolution, but working with our students to define professionalism goals or expectations. And sometimes that means it's timeliness. It's when do we answer emails? How are we communicating? So all of that kind of falls within this professionalism nugget. And it's fairly broad, actually. Perfect. Equity and inclusion. So demonstrate the awareness, attitudes, knowledge, and skills required to equitably engage and include people from different and local global cultures. So this also means engaging in anti-racist practices that actively challenge the system, structures, and policies of racism. This was also written within 2021, so a lot was going on within 2020, and this reflects a lot of that as well. And I want to acknowledge that DEI includes so much more than just these things that's listed here. And there's a lot happening within our country and our nation across the various states. Without getting too in deep, like there's a lot going on to actively discriminate towards other populations. And so this is something that there's an opportunity to continue to include everyone and make sure that there's a space at the table for everyone. But some of those sample behaviors are solicited and use feedback from multiple cultural perspectives and how to make inclusivity and equity-minded decisions. So how does this serve a larger population and not just these 3 people or these 6 people on our team? Actively contribute to inclusive and equitable practices that influence individual and systemic change. When we think about where we are in our department or our university or our courses and what we're teaching, how does it play to everybody? Or how do we take out certain things that are inherently biased? And so I'm more than happy to have a separate course and things on for folks of how to, if they're hiring, this is more of an HR stuff. If you need help creating new job descriptions or expectations or training for students of various backgrounds or abilities, we have an entire section on that as well. We also talk about addressing systems of privilege, opportunities of members historically marginalized communities, seeking global cross-cultural interactions, demonstrating flexibility, and adapting to diverse environments. So there's a lot going on here, and we all know that DEI is a huge piece. And this is the fifth thing that employers are looking for. We're going to dive into you all kind of applying some of these concepts into different scenarios and how to help students understand, yes, I did gain communication skills, I gained professionalism, I gained teamwork, and how to get them to speak about them. The biggest issue that we have, and I have a colleague, Sarah Matthews, who works in the Center of Leadership, and she works with graduation with leadership distinction within the university. And she and I talked a lot about how meaningful reflection of your experiences will help you within your interviews, gain new employment, and things like that. And the biggest gap is that students don't know how to talk about it. So we know why competencies are important. We know what employers are looking for. We know there's a skills gap. We know ways to help students. But the biggest piece is that typically we know how to help students, but students don't know how to speak about what they know, what they've done, and how they contribute. They sit there and they blank out. So here's how we're going to help them do that. So I would love for you all to either unmute yourself, put some stuff in the chat, take a second to think about it. A student experience on our campus that students can participate in is a study abroad opportunity. The three things I want us to focus on is critical thinking, equity and inclusion, and communication. These are all actual pictures of our students at various study abroad opportunities. And so I want y'all to think about a student has gone to study abroad, they've come back to your office. How do we then help students understand these are three things that you've gained, and how can they then talk about it to an employer within an interview, and how they can contribute to another team or within industry?
Hello, I utilize a lot of reflection as well, and I think a term that I often use when talking with individuals about reflection is speaking to how their thoughts have stretched and how their perspectives have taken on a new form in a sense. And not only looking at the differences, but identifying those similarities so that they can really connect to people's hearts. And then when we can see people through that heart connection, I think that we can make other connections strong as well. And that will give them the opportunity to be able to verbalize their experiences in a positive way. They don't have opportunities to practice that a lot. So one of the things that we try to do in one of the classes is to allow them that space to actively engage with other healthcare leaders, if you will, so that they can do just that, kind of like their elevator pitch and things of that nature.
Of course, I love that. Something that's small that some students don't think about is, what communications are different? What languages are spoken here? Do I know the language? Do I not? How have I learned to communicate with people if I don't know how to speak the language in this country? What are values that folks hold that are different than where I am? And sometimes too, they don't have to go to a different country. They can go to a different state. If folks have never left South Carolina, there's a lot of different cultures within America that they can go to and check out, whether it's a summer exchange program to a different university or even their internships, right? Could be very different. Critical thinking, something with some of these students is I'll ask them, how did you get around? How did you go from point A to point B? And that's huge for them because the transportation system may be completely different than where you are. And you have to think, where am I getting on? Where am I getting off? How do I get from point A to point B? Do I actually have to go through 7 points to get to my destination? There's a lot of critical thinking in navigating a transportation system outside of the US. And I think it's really special for students to sit and think and be like, okay, this is where I need to go. There's so much critical thinking involved with travel alone that they haven't really thought about, but how to actually explain that to them and think about, where did you go? Who did you see? When you went to the market, how did you find what you needed? Have you seen something you've never seen before? Maybe there's completely different foods and you don't really know what they are. And sometimes too, they'll say, I was in our cafeteria on campus and I didn't know what anything was. And what they eat for breakfast is so different than what we eat here. You're right. These are all new things that you're learning. Professional ideas. Maybe your workday was only 4 days a week. Maybe you started at 10 a.m., but you ate dinner at 9 p.m., right? And you were out until 11 p.m. And so that's the culture and how you communicate. And there's just a different way of doing things. And so I think that that's all also very special. Orientation leader, we'll spend like 2 minutes on this one. Any ideas on how orientation leaders could gain these 3 things?
Again, going back to how can you make that connection? They do have to talk to a variety of people. I see them often on the campus engaging with a large group of individuals, and it's more than just age differences, it's different backgrounds, and just keeping that enthusiasm and being able to problem solve whatever might come their way. You know, maybe if someone twists their ankle while they're walking the campus or something of that nature, but sometimes we take these concepts and we make them extremely complex when they're actually can be simplified. But again, it's making those connections, like you said earlier. And I love that analogy or that strategy about the transportation element. So I think the same things are happening here because they have to keep that entire group engaged throughout the process.
Oh, I love that, Kimberly. Yes, definitely when you're meeting new people, you don't know what's going on or where people are. If someone, let's say someone does sprain their ankle, how are you then altering your tour for them? How do you continue to make it special? How do you continue to sell Carolina and the magic of our campus when someone's just injured themselves or someone's utilizing a wheelchair? What accessible routes are there on campus? How are we then able to show them the same experience as someone else? So that is your universal design, is how do we make your tour already accessible for anyone? And that's our standard, that it's available and package ready for anyone. Do we have different resources available for different folks? Do some people need something in large print? Maybe we have someone who's hard of hearing in our group. Do we have either an interpreter or an additional person to speak from the back? If we're only projecting our voice from one angle, is it getting to everyone? So how are we thinking of holistic engagement? Absolutely. And then meeting new people from different states and countries and cities, seeing how a multi-day event is organized and run. Absolutely. We're looking at event management, logistics, organization of checking people in, the magic of them coming to campus. You know, all of these things are huge. So this is like a PR or communication person's, or anyone who wants to go into like entertainment within our HRSM area, right? There's hospitality. This is perfect for folks who want to do that. It's a lot of hands-on experience. This is my favorite ever. So I originally grew up in Nashville and went to school in East Tennessee. And so a rafting guide was something very common that a lot of students did. They would go out on the Ocoee and lead this incredible experience. And they would come back and just say, I don't know, that was cool. I would beg to differ. This is one of the most impactful experiences. You learn so much by doing something as a rafting guide and how they can apply it to their future work within teamwork, leadership, and critical thinking. So I'd love to hear from you all. How does critical thinking, leadership, and teamwork work within a rafting guide? What are students accomplishing and learning over the summer on the Ocoee River or in Colorado, California, wherever? What are they learning here?
Well, one thing I think is they have to be comfortable with uncertainty. When you get in something of this nature, you really have an idea of what may be coming, but you don't know how you'll respond until you're in that situation. So it's real time opportunities for them to problem solve.
Communicate effectively and in a commanding manner to get teammates to work together. Absolutely. I think the last thing we need is an uncertain rafting guide. I don't know how this is going to go, everyone. Hold on. How to plan for the experience and for safety issues. Yes, that's huge. If folks don't think they're going to come out of this being a risk management expert, they've missed it, right? Typically, they're taking potentially up to like 5+ groups out a day, and everyone who gets in your boat is different. They're coming from a different experience. Maybe not everyone's comfortable with water. They got drug along with their friends, but like, hey, this is going to be awesome, and you're doing this, right? You may have someone who's very uncomfortable. You may have a group of just complete adrenaline junkies ready to go. There's various levels of experience. Maybe this is more therapeutic recreation for some folks. Maybe we have different folks with various abilities coming into our boat. How do we adapt for every person who comes in and sits? We are responsible for their safety. Critical thinking as well. How does the water look? How are we riding? How high is the water? How quick is the water moving that day? And every day that's going to be different. Same with leadership. So that commanding presence of when we've laid down our expectations at the beginning before we get in, we go over our safety instructions. If you were to fall out, and you go into the water, this is how you need to adjust your body, right? We're addressing things ahead of time, in the moment, and after. So how are we also doing participation, involvement? You have to build rapport with everyone in your boat because they are trusting you. So there's so much that can be learned from the interacting guide. And I think students sell themselves short when they think they do a fun job and it's not relevant to the future. This is super relevant, and we're going to tell you how and why. So I would encourage you all that when you meet with your students, if they've had a pretty unique experience, that it is still applicable to the interview they're going to have next year for a company that's not within the adventure area. But it hurts my heart when students say, well, I didn't get an accounting internship this summer. I did this instead, and now I'm behind. You're not behind. I'll tell you why. So I would encourage you all to have these conversations with students. One of our last examples would be an academic tutor. So professional in technology, critical thinking, I'd love to hear from you all. How does this transition into other professions? What are they learning with these three things? If they were an academic tutor, supplemental instruction, any of those things. I think too, with critical thinking, we have to adjust what is working for who we're tutoring. And so maybe they learned in a different way, or there's something that varies, right? Yeah, Kelly, everyone has unique needs. And yes, now how to address and deliver critical feedback. So how do we study? Are we putting in, what do we need to do that's different? Is there a different exercise that needs to be issued with this student, but this student needs something totally different? So knowing how to build unique guides and platforms and study materials for each person you tutor is going to be different. Same with if you're doing a group session versus an individual session, completely different ball game. And so you're learning how to manage a group, various expectations, various learning styles as well. Yep. Decide which revision points to focus on. Exactly. So prepping for a specific one-on-one tutor or group session, it's going to be very different. And so they have to constantly be thinking in the moment, where are people? Where are they invested? What's happening? And the professionalism, you got to show up on time, be prepared, be ready to go, be an expert in what you're tutoring on and what technology is available for you to utilize within these sessions. So we touched on 4 of these, right? And so there are so much more that students are doing every day that they think does not apply to them. Baristas, lifeguards, construction management, social media and content creators, outdoor stuff, catering, you name it. There's so much more happening. And we hopefully now have more of a foundation to help them reflect and be able to think about those experiences. So the first time they're thinking about it, hopefully isn't in an interview and sitting there thinking, hey, have you demonstrated leadership skills? I don't know, right? So let's take that time now to invest in them, but also how are we incorporating this into our curriculum or our classroom for them to get excited about that? These are some additional resources. Again, you all are going to get the PowerPoint for this information, but what are the competencies for your lesson plans, your experiences or employment opportunities? If you have student employment on campus, I'm more than happy to also help sit down and think about what are they gaining out of their employment experience and how can they talk about it later. You can also have students assess themselves on competencies. You can map out what other gaps or opportunities that may be within your curriculum and how to fill those. Allow time for reflection and point out core competencies. And then, of course, Graduation with Leadership Distinction. They're great partners within the university if you want to touch base with them as well. This is my information here. If you all ever need anything, please let me know. Thank you for hanging in with me. I appreciate you all being here. If there's anything you ever need, please reach out for us at the Career Center or individually. You all were an excellent group, and I really appreciate your engagement and contribution.